Okay, we're on Chav Zayin Amud Beis 27b in Maseches Tamid as we learn in memory of Rabbi Berger. So the Mishnah had said V'haneros dolkin mikan mikan. So we're basically in the middle of the page, and the Mishnah had described how through this certain chamber passageway there was lights on each side in order to light up the way, and then it described the room that had the mikvah where the kohen or the priest would immerse, and then it described that there was also a restroom right around there, and it described it as a restroom of honor. And what was its honor? If one found the door closed, you would know that there was a person there, and if you would find and then you would wait for that person to come out before you would enter, and that was honor, right? That was showing respect and dignity for the person that was currently using the restroom. So now we're going to talk about this. Rav Safra hava Yosef beisakise. Rav Safra was one time sitting in the washroom. Rabbi Abba necharle. Rabbi Abba came along, and apparently there wasn't a door. So Rabbi Abba coughed outside to alert the person inside, wondering if he should be able to come in or not. Amar le'ol mar. So Rav Safra said to Rabbi Abba, "Come on in." Basar denafik. Once he came out, Amar le Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba said to Rav Safra, Adkan lo salikas l'seir, gamart mili de seir. He said, until now, you've never entered Seir, right? You've never been in this land of Edom, the Edomites. And they are people that behave in an immodest way. And yet, you have learned the ways of Seir. What does he mean? He's basically accusing Rav Safra of acting immodestly. So what does this mean? Lav hachi tanan. Didn't we learn in a Mishnah, our Mishnah, mitzao na'ol biyadua sheyesh adam, that the respect or the dignity of this restroom was that if you found that the door was closed, you would know that someone was there. Lememra de lomi baile lemayal, which was there to teach you that you shouldn't enter the bathroom, you shouldn't enter the restroom while someone else is there. So Rav Safra should not have told Rabbi Abba that he could come in to the washroom when Rabbi Abba did that coughing to alert him. So now the question is Rav Safra was a great Torah scholar. How could he have gotten this wrong? Rav Safra Savar, so Rav Safra understood, Dilma Mesukanhu. He was worried that perhaps Rabbi Abba was in biological danger. What's that mean? Kedetanya, we learned in a Braisa. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, Amud hachozer, maybe es ha'adam lidei hajiroken. So if someone has to go to the washroom, a bowel movement, and you hold it back, that causes a person to suffer hidrokan. That can be translated in different ways. Some sort of digestive problem and edema, maybe the right word. And silon hachozer, and if one keeps back from urinating, maybe it's adam lidei rakon, that brings a person to jaundice. So Rav Safra, who allowed Rabbi Abba to come in, even though he was using the restroom, was worried that Rabbi Abba would be in danger if he didn't allow him in immediately, because he would be holding himself back from using the restroom. So Amar le Rav l'chia berei, v'chein Amar le Rav Huna l'Rabba berei. So Rav said to his son Chia, and Rav Huna said to his son Rabba, Chasheich takei nafshecha ukidem. Relieve yourself when it gets dark, and again before daybreak. Even if you don't feel like you really need to, really make sure that you do that. Takein nafshach ki heichi delo tirkach. And what's the reason for this? So basically, let's just give a little bit of a background. So you used to be able to relieve yourself basically on the street, right? And if there's no one on the street at that time, you could relieve yourself right near your home without concern that you'd be seen. So what one rabbi was teaching their children, what the rabbis were teaching their children, was try to use the washroom, try to relieve yourself at nighttime and right at daybreak, because then there's nobody on the street and you'll be able to do it right near your home. Because if you wait to daytime, Then what's going to happen is, let's just read it again. Ki heichi delo tirchak. What you're going to have to do is then you're going to have to distance yourself. You'll have to walk far away from the street so that no one sees you relieve yourself. And that amount of time that it will take for you to walk far away from the street, that's going to be a period of time when you're keeping yourself back from relieving yourself when you need to, and that could jeopardize your health. So therefore, try to go at night, and again before daybreak. Times when people aren't around, you won't have to, you'll be able to go at those moments, and then you won't have to relieve yourself the rest of the day, so you won't come to this problem of having to hold it in as you find a place that is more modest. And then they're describing, tu vigali kasi vakum. When you relieve yourself, you need to behave modestly. So what does that mean? You sit down first, and only then do you uncover yourself. And afterwards, you cover yourself first, and only then do you stand up. Shetofu shasi, shetofa aches, and now we're going to talk about some other good recommendations when it comes to drinking. So shetofu shasi, when you drink wine, you should rinse the cup first and only then drink from it. Shetofa aches, and after you drink the wine, you should rinse the cup and only then put it back in its place. So that's with wine. Uchsha'ata shosem mayim, and when you drink water, you actually don't have to be worried so much about rinsing the cup afterwards. Rather, shefoch mehen, rather pour out some of the water to rinse the rim of the cup. And afterwards, you can give the cup to your student if he is thirsty. Okay? Kedetanya. And we're going to say that this is reflected in a brisa. It says, Lo yishta adam mayim v'yitein letalmido. A person should not drink water and then give the remaining water to his student. Unless he first poured some of it out. When you pour out the water, it basically sanitizes the rim that you drank from, and therefore then your student will be able to feel comfortable drinking from the same water. And in fact, there was an incident where a certain individual drank water, didn't pour some of it out, and then gave it to his student, who was obviously very thirsty, but didn't pour out a little bit first. And that student was a very delicate person. And because his teacher hadn't poured out a little bit of water first to sanitize it, he didn't want to drink from it. And in parentheses, but he himself felt uncomfortable pouring out a little bit. He thought that would be disrespectful to his teacher. And what ended up happening is, he ended up dying of thirst. So that's just a reminder. You drink from the water, you pour a little bit out, and then you give it to your student. And at that moment they said, a person should not drink water and then give it to his student unless he pours some out first. Rav Ashi says, Hilkach, therefore, Hai Talmida the Shafach Kamei Rabbi. Therefore, a student that pours out a little bit of the water from the cup after his teacher drank from it, less be mishum afkirusa, there's no problem of disrespectful actions. You may have thought that for a student to pour out a little bit of water after his teacher drank from it would be disrespectful to his teacher. We're saying no, because of all this, it's actually not considered disrespectful. Keeping yourself hydrated and safe is going to be, it takes precedence. Okay, kol mili lo tifle ba'apei rabach, but this is interesting. Nothing are you allowed to spit out in the presence of your teacher, meaning sometimes something you'll eat, or you'll be in a scenario where you have to spit out some saliva. So we're saying don't do it in the presence of your teacher because that's disrespectful. Bar mikara v'daisa, except in the case of a dish of gourd or a dish of porridge. If you're eating those out, then you could spit out the saliva even in front of your teacher. Why? Because this saliva is like a molten bar of lead, and to refrain from spitting it out would be dangerous. Okay, Tanan Hassam. Okay, now we're going to go back to the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, and how it worked. Ish harabayis ha'mechazar kol mishmar v'mishmar. So we learned in a Mishnah that the man who was in charge of the Temple Mount, he was in charge of overseeing the watches at the Temple Mount. He would circulate nightly among each and every watch post to make sure that the people that were supposed to do the watching, the Leviim that were supposed to do the watching, were awake and performing their duties. Va'avukos dokos lefanav. And there were lit torches that were carried before him, so that the watchmen, would see him approaching. V'chol mishmar she'eno omed. And at every watch post where the watchman did not stand up, so the omerlo, the person, the guy that's in charge, he would say to the watchman, Ish har habayis shalom alecha. He would say, Omerlo Ish har habayis shalom alecha. So the person that's in charge of everybody would say to this person that did not respond, did not stand up, he would say, peace be unto you. Nikar shehu yashen, and if it was evident that he was sleeping, chov tobe maklo, the guy in charge would strike him with his staff. Urashus hayasalo lisrof eskuso, and in fact, he even had permission to burn the watchman's garment in order to discipline him. V'heim omrim, and those who would hear the watchman being rebuked, they would say to one another, Ma kol ba'azara, what is that sound in the azara, in the temple courtyard? Kol ben Levi loke uvegadav nisrafim. It's the sound of a Levite being hit and having his clothes burned. Sheyashin lo al mishmar, because he was sleeping on the watch. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Pam achas matzuas achi imi yashin v'sarfos ksuso. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, once the guy in charge found my mother's brother sleeping on his watch, and they burned his garments. Rabbi Abba says, Kimat Rabbi Yochanan baha masnisa amar hachi. That when Rabbi Yochanan would reach this Mishnah in his studies about hitting the guy for sleeping and maybe even burning his clothes, he would say as follows, Ashreihem l'rishonim. Praiseworthy were the early generations. Shafilo al onesh shena osidin, because they would even give out judgment, even in the case of an offense caused by unavoidable sleep. Shalo al onashina, so and all the more so would they give out judgment, would they mete out judgment in the case of offenses that were alachas kama v'kama, that were not caused by unavoidable sleep. Okay. Tanya, we went to the Brisa. Again, now we're just going to give some good advice. Rabbi says, which way of life is the upright path that a person should select for himself? He should love admonitions. Because long as admonitions are in this world, nachas ruach ba'al le'olam, then pleasantness comes into the world. Tovu v'racha ba'in le'olam, good and blessing come into the world. V'ram yistalakes min ha'olam, and evil departs from the world. Shenemar, as the verse says, v'lam mochichim yin'am v'aleihem tavo birkas tov. The verse says in Mishnah, in Proverbs. But to those who admonish shall be delight, and a good blessing shall come upon them. The Yesh Omerim, some say, the path to choose is Yachzik be'emunah yasera. You should choose to adhere to utmost faithfulness in all areas of our lives. Shenemar, as the verse says, Einai b'nemnei eretz l'sheves imadi. The verse in Tehillim says, my eyes are upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. And it continues on, he who walks in a way of integrity shall serve God. But again, we see the wisdom in being faithful. Amr b'Shmuel bar Nachman Rabbi Yonasan. B'Shmuel bar Nachman, he said, in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, kol mochiach es chaveiro l'shem shamayim, anyone that rebukes another for the sake of heaven, zochel l'chalko shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is privileged to dwell on the portion of God. The Holy One, blessed is He. Shenemar mochiach adam acharai, as the verse says in Mishlei, he that rebukes a man shall be behind me. V'lo oda, not only that, elishem moshchin alav chut shel chesed. Not only that, but Hashem will extend over him a cord of divine grace, as the verse says, Chen yimtza mimachalik lashon. He'll find more favor than he who flatters with the tongue. And that it's in that same verse about the person that has rebuke, that rebukes. Okay. Now we're going to go back to analyzing the Mishnah. So this is going to talk about the next part of the Mishnah that describes the beginning of the temple service every day. And it says, whoever wants to remove the ashes from the altar, to clean up the altar from all the sacrifices from the day before, he rises early, and it says that he immerses himself before the appointed priest arrives. So, Hagufa Kasha, so the Gemara says we seem to have a contradiction. Amret, it says, Mishu wrote to listen Mizbeach, the person that wants to clean the ashes of the Mizbeach, Mashkim Vitovel Ad Shelo Yavo Hamamuna. He should get up early and immerse before the appointed Kohen arrives. Alma Lav B'fayas Talya Milsa, which would seem to tell us that the clearing of the ashes was not dependent on a lottery. V'hadar Tani, but afterwards the Mishnah teaches us Yavo V'fayas, that the person that wants to that the appointed priest would say, whoever wants to take away the ashes, they should come and participate in the lottery. Alma B'fayas Talya Milsa, so evidently the matter is dependent on a lottery. So which one is it? Was it just the first one there, the earliest one to arrive, or was it dependent on a lottery? So Rabbi says, L'kasha, it's not a question. Kan Kedim Takana, Kan La'achar Takana. This one, when the Mishnah says that whoever is ready first is the one that gets to do it, that was before the takana, before the sages enacted the ordinance of a lottery. Kan la'achar takana, and there when the Mishnah seems to say it's based on a lottery, that was after the sages had already enacted the ordinance of a lottery. It's not because we learned in a Mishnah about the development of the lottery. Barishona, in the beginning, Kol mi shrotz l'israel mizbeach, anybody that wanted to remove the ashes from the altar, Torem, could do so. Bisman shehein ratzin. Bisman shehein merubim, when there were many Kohanim who wanted to do this task, then ratzin va'olin bakevesh. Ratzin va'olin bakevesh. They would run up and ascend onto the ramp. They basically race. And any priest, any Kohen who precedes the other and reaches within 4 cubits of the top of the altar first, they got to remove the ashes. Hayushnayim shavin, and if 2 people were equal, Hamamuna omer lehem hitzpiu, the appointed Kohen would say, raise your fingers, and a lottery would be performed. Umahin motzin, what is this finger lottery? Which fingers would they extend for the lottery? Achas o shtayim, they could extend 1 or 2 fingers, right? Basically, the appointed Kohen would choose an arbitrary number, and then the Kohanim that were in the running would stand in a circle, and they'd put out their fingers, and he'd go around the circle counting the fingers until he reached the chosen number. And that person got to do it. The ein motziin gudol b'mikdash, and Kohanim would not extend a thumb in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, because the thumb could enable someone to manipulate the lottery. So you wouldn't put out your thumb. So then what happened? Ma'aseh shnayim hayu shavin. It happened once that 2 priests were equal, as they ratzin va'olam hakevesh, as they were running and going up the ramp to the altar. V'dachav echam yemes chaver, and one of them pushed the other, v'nishbar raglo, and that person broke his leg. And when the court saw that people were coming to potential danger because of this, they instituted that the Kohanim would remove the ashes from the altar only by means of a lottery. Rava said, both this, going back to the Mishnah, both this clause, which says that to remove the ashes you just had to get there early, and the other clause which says that a lottery is conducted, they're actually both describing the procedure after the ordinance of the lottery was already enacted. And this is what the Mishnah is teaching. Mishu wrote a level of fayis. Anyone that wants to come and be a part of the lottery, mashkim, has to get up early, v'tovel, and immerse, ad shel yavamuna, and arrive before the appointed Kohen has arrived. We'll stop here. May this be for an aliyas neshama.